All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining me this morning. I know everyone's busy, especially coming out of fall break. I'm sure everyone's still trying to play catch up. So, again, I appreciate you joining me, taking time out of your schedule. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vanessa Waters, and I am the McKinney-Vento and Immigrant Grant Manager here at the department. During this webinar, please feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat box. So at the Tennessee Department of Education, we ground our work in our strategic plan, Best for All. The plan focuses on 3 priorities: academics, student readiness, and educators for all Tennessee students. As you all know, the work you're doing with students in transition is strongly connected to all 3 of these areas. The support that you provide educators, students, and families is crucial. So for today's agenda, I will provide an overview of ARP Homeless 2.0 and fiscal considerations. That includes ARP 1.0, but mainly the 2.0. We'll talk about allowable use of funds and new updated guidance from ED. We will have Catherine Knowles from Metro-Nashville and Michelle Wilder from Kingsport join us to discuss ways that they're using their funds and how they plan to sustain programming funding. And then last, we'll have time for questions and discussions. So let's look at the ARP Homeless overview. I hope many of you have found the ARP Homeless funding beneficial to your homeless programming and providing those supports to students experiencing homelessness. The American Rescue Plan, ARP, a total of $8 million was dispersed by the U.S. Department of Education to address the needs of homeless children and youth, highlighted by the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Based on the guidance and recommendations from ED, ARP Homeless was allocated to LEAs through 2 separate awards, ARP Homeless 1.0 and ARP Homeless 2.0. Similar to federal law for the McKinney-Vento subgrant, funding should be used to identify homeless children and youth. While many homeless liaisons were unable to find many of their students during the pandemic due to the number of reasons, our homeless funds have been used to help with heightening the identification, expanding ways to identify that may not otherwise have been attainable, and provided much needed wraparound services, providing assistance needed for homeless children and youth to attend and participate fully in school activities, including in-person instruction. And of course, re-engagement was a big thing at the beginning of this application or these funds to make sure that you're getting the re-engagement from your students and your families and returning to class and then keeping them there now that COVID is kind of a little bit behind us, making sure that we're retaining those students and providing those supports to keep them caught up with other students in the school. So ARP Homeless 1.0 was 25% of the state's ARP Homeless allocation that was available to current McKinney-Vento subgrantees. The ARP 1.0 grant was based on a competitive formula, and ARP Homeless 2.0 was 75% of the state's ARP Homeless allocation, and it opened in September of 2021 to all Tennessee LEAs. 20 of the 24 subgrantees took the ARP Homeless 1.0 funds. We had 105 of 147 LEAs that took the ARP Homeless 2.0 funds. And then we had 13 LEAs release funds due to not meeting the required threshold by ED of $5,000. So let's look at some fiscal considerations. As I've mentioned, ARP Homeless 1.0 and 2.0 is a 3-year grant. As you can see, we're currently in year 3 of this grant, and all award funds must be obligated on or before September 30 of 2024, and all award funds must be liquidated no later than December 15th, 2024. ED has not issued any extensions for these funds, and based on guidance from ED, they are not going to be considering extensions at this time. So we really are looking to spend down these funds and really hoping not to revert back any funds and really show them that we can spend this money to support our homeless programming here in Tennessee. So some ARP fiscal considerations for releasing of your funds. So LEAs who did not plan to spend all the funds, or LEAs who do not plan to spend all the funds, you need to let us know by close of business day on August 16th of 2024. If you sit down and you look at it and you're working with your team, you're like, well, there's just no way we're going to spend, maybe we have $1,000 left. And you're like, there's just no way we can spend $1,000. Or maybe you're still sitting on the full amount or even half of that, and your team and you have just cannot find a way to spend that money. And you know that you have all this ESSER funds, and so you're just not going to spend it. You need to let the department know, again, by August 16th of 2024. If you know before then, please let us know so that we can go ahead and give that funding reallocated to other LEAs who are able to use the funding. And then if you're wishing to release those funds, you'll just need to send me an email and then complete the release of funds form that can be found in ePlan. And so all those links are there for you. Again, if you don't know yet if you can spend that money and you want to reach out to me to get ideas on how to use these funds, please don't hesitate. I'm happy to help you kind of go through that. Again, the whole point is we don't want to revert money back to Ed. So Ed and the SEA highly encourage LEAs to use ARP Homeless funds before using your Title I Part A Homeless Set Aside or your McKinney-Vento subgrant funds. LEAs must ensure that all costs associated with ARP Homeless funds are reasonable and necessary, just like when you're using your Title I Part A or your McKinney-Vento. It needs to be supporting the education of the homeless child or youth that you are supporting. And so that's kind of what we're looking at when it comes to using these funds, is making sure that is helping that student. LEAs may budget reasonably and necessary costs to manage their federal grants in a compliant and effective manner. We've had some issues with this. The limit for administration costs for ARP Homeless 2.0 is 5% of the total award. And so you want to make sure that you now are, if we're in year 3, that you are doing your percentage based on your previous years that you've already used. The 5% is allowable is meant to cover work that is related to ARP Homeless only. If you're using a stipend for administration, for staff, you want to make sure that they're doing that outside of work time, outside of their regular work day, work week, or the year. Again, a stipend is meant to be after hours. LEAs must provide a description of the reasonable and necessary administrative activities and personnel used to administer the grant, including the full-time equivalent, FTE, and the amount deducted from the grant. All costs must be administrative in nature. For example, program director, clerical staff, bookkeeper, salary, benefits, those kinds of things. Travel for admin staff, professional development for your admin staff, and things like that. So let's look at allowable use of funds. LEA should continue to analyze the needs of students experiencing homelessness and considering the COVID-19 pandemic and how it continues to impact students experiencing homelessness. Efforts to support historically underserved populations are strongly recommended and encouraged. Looking at your rural youth, your tribal youth, students of color, students with disabilities, English learners, youth, and other underserved populations. Allowable activities may include any expenses necessary to facilitate the identification, enrollment, retention, and educational success of homeless children and youth. It is recommended, oops, I'm sorry, I went way too far there. Let's see if we can get us back here to the right slide. Okay, here we go. It is recommended that recommended from Ed that LEA should continue to focus on the attention of the priorities for these students and making sure they're getting those support, those wraparound services, to include transportation and really anything else that's going to help support that student. And I'll say this probably throughout the presentation today, but we're really focusing on the homeless student and their supports and not the entire family when it comes to using these ARP Homeless funding. So funds can be used to purchase cell phones, Of course, you want to make sure you're using caution when you're when you're buying the cell phones or any tech equipment, and how you're going to be using those and tracking those to make sure that your unaccompanied homeless youth, or maybe just in your youth in general, are not going to misuse or go into the wrong websites or things that they're not supposed to be using the phone for. You can use the funds to provide access to reliable high-speed internet for students through the purchase of internet-connected devices, equipment, mobile hotspots, wireless service plans, or installation of community Wi-Fi hotspots, for example, at your homeless shelter, especially if you're underserved communities. If you're paying, if you have a lot of families that are in those shelters, paying for short-term housing, temporary housing up to 3 nights. As you've seen in some of my emails, new guidance from Ed allows for the extension beyond 3 nights. However, you must have a pre-approval for additional nights that must be approved by Ed and the state in order to be able to extend that past the 3 night. Because again, we want to make sure that we are not using these funds for hotels that are not going to be effectively helping our students. And I know that sounds a little bit redundant, but in going with some of the Ed webinars, they remind us continually that it's for the student and what is best for the student. And so again, that's what you're looking at when you're also looking at your hotel stays. A reminder that temporary housing should be used when it's necessary to enable the homeless student and youth to attend school and to participate fully in activities. We have a question in the chat box. Can funds be used for a homeless family in need of food and don't have any money because the mother's been buying food and paying for gas, getting back and forth to work? So unfortunately, ARP Homeless funds can only be used for food for the student. If you need food outside of for the student, you would need to work with your community-based organizations to get additional food. It's a great question. And if mom is paying for gas, maybe that might be an option to pay for the parent to drop the student off at the school to get reimbursement for that as far as transportation goes. But for food, it's solely for the student. So funds can be used for providing store cards, prepaid debit cards, or gas cards to purchase necessary materials and support for students. All store cards, prepaid cards, and gas cards must be obligated by September 30 of 2024, and they all have to be used or liquidated by December 30, 2024. It's very important. And again, has stressed that highly that they need to be liquidated by that liquidation date of December 30, 2024. Updated guidance from Ed allows for LEAs to purchase portable bedding, such as air mattresses, cots, pillows, and blankets. Again, those in your narratives, you need to provide the need and rationale. And while we all know we work with, homeless students, we know that a good night's rest is definitely going to help in their educational piece of things and getting good grades. Putting that in the narrative about how it's supporting that child academically and educationally is definitely something that we're looking for when we're looking through our narratives, how the cots, pillows, and blankets are going to affect that student. Again, Ed is allowing LEAs to purchase homeless vehicles for their programming. As always been, the SEA will have to have we'll need to have give you a pre-approval for that, and then that will be included in your spending plan narrative. You may want to make sure that you're providing the need and rationale of the vehicle and how that is going to be in the best interest of your homeless programming. While maybe sometimes it may be cheaper to purchase bus passes or use maybe a sped bus. Financially, it may not be feasible to buy a homeless programming vehicle. But again, Ed wants to make sure that you're looking at all those avenues and looking at the cost effectiveness when you are purchasing a vehicle for your program. Hiring additional staff. Again, you want to make sure that you could be hiring somebody to do your transportation coordination specifically for homeless programming. They're going to work with your transportation coordinator for the whole LEA. So that way, every student is getting that service they need for transportation. Re-engagement specialists, systems navigators, maybe success coaches to use these funds if you're still kind of wondering how to use funding. Funds can be used to purchase laptops before graduation. Of course, this is a big one. It's going to be a harder one for us to be able to approve in your narratives. This will have to be pre-approved by ED before it is even approved by the state, but you'll have to show us how that's going to benefit the student to have a laptop. Again, we all know up front that a student going into college, they will really need a laptop. It's probably going to be in their best interest to have something going right into college for them to have for their classes, but that's going to have special permission from ED in order to do that. But if you are considering it, please don't hesitate to do that pre-approval for us that we can send up to ED. Family and unaccompanied youth can have minor car repairs. Again, that's new and it's going to be case by case. And then we'll have to have a pre-approval again for those minor car repairs. We're looking at if it's going to be reasonable and necessary. If you're spending thousands of dollars on one vehicle for a family, that thousands of dollars can be used to provide support to multiple families. And so again, we're going to look at case by case. While one situation may be approved, the other one may not. All ARP Homeless funds are intended to support the student's educational and academic needs, again, not to support the entire family. So as I mentioned previously, some of the items that ED has recently made allowable must be have pre-approvals by both ED and the department. And pre-approvals that are needed would be extended hotel stays over the 3-night stay, minor car repairs, graduation laptops, and vehicles. A form stack submission must be completed for all allowable use of funds pre-approval. All items listed on the previous slide must be pre-approved from ED and SEA. Approval will be issued on a case-by-case basis. LEAs must provide a detailed description of the proposed purchase, including the cost. LEAs must also provide a detailed justification as to why the purchase is necessary to directly support the educational and academic needs of the student. LEAs will receive feedback from me once the team has reviewed all the forms. For example, for pre-approval of purchasing a homeless program vehicle, the LEA must show that the use of funds is reasonable and necessary. At a minimum, the LEA should be able to demonstrate that the purchase of the vehicle or vehicles would be more cost-effective overall than other means of transportation available. For example, if the LEA already has a vehicle that could be used for transportation for their students to their school of origin or less expensive means of transportation, then the student less expensive means of transportation students, for example, leasing a vehicle or using a private vehicle or reimbursing the cost of transportation. It would not be reasonable and necessary to use ARP Homeless funds to purchase a vehicle or vehicles if it's cheaper to do an outside private vehicle, reimbursing those kinds of things. Let's see. Well, the slideshow, yes, this slide deck will be, if not already, in TDO resources. I believe Jillian has already posted it there, but if it's not, it will be after this call today. So again, wraparound services are highly recommended for providing supports for these students, but caution should be used when issuing store cards, prepaid cards, gas cards. There is an increased opportunity for fraud, theft, misuse, and difficulty, of course, with accountability. And we'll add additional work for you as the homeless liaison and the LEA. But it is recommended that LEAs consider partnerships with local vendors and online ordering for basic needs. It could become too much to manage with prepaid cards. So again, you want to just make sure that you're looking at all those avenues before just going out and buying cards. And of course, remember, again, these have to be spent by December 15th of 2024. Maybe instead of using prepaid cards, consider securing an account, or shop with the family for their needs, shop with a student. Maybe establish a voucher program for approved items. Again, the overall needs are the result of the pandemic, and so you want to make sure you're keeping that in mind when you're looking at using these cards. And you want to consider what works for your LEA. While I'm saying prepaid cards and store cards are allowed, some LEAs have come out and said to me that their LEA, their board says absolutely not. You cannot use funding for gas cards or for share rides and things like that. And so again, it's up to your LEA on what you can use your wraparound services for. One last reminder that full participation and engagement is the overall reaching goal of McKinney-Vento funding and ARP Homeless funding. It's essential to keep your typical allowable expenses in mind, along with extraordinary circumstances, including your salaries and benefits, your professional services, other purchase services, and general supplies. As a homeless liaison, you still have a unique opportunity with this funding to impact students experiencing homelessness through long-term high-impact strategies. And you want to keep in mind that you should be approaching this challenge from a position to advocate, and to maybe in the past, your board has been no, but now you have additional funding to advocate to get whatever programming, resources or supports that maybe you didn't have funding for in the past. And so again, we're all here to support our homeless students and our programming to make it better. And now's the opportunity to do that. So do we have any questions before we look at from the field? Okay, so while the information I just covered is necessary, I also wanted to give you an opportunity to hear from liaisons in the field. I asked Catherine Knowles from Davidson County, or Metro-Nashville Public Schools, and Michelle Wilder from Kingsport to share a little bit about how they've been using the ARP Homeless funding and possible ways that they're going to look at sustaining it. While I have some slides from Catherine, Michelle and I'm not able to get slides together for hers, but she will kind of share. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Catherine. Thank you, ladies, for joining us as well.
Yeah, hello, everyone. This is Catherine in Nashville, and just wanted to share. So this just briefly, many of you all know I've done this exact same work for 26 years. And so the ARP funding was certainly a windfall and, beyond my wildest dreams of funding opportunities and new initiatives that we could launch. I would say, looking at those, allowable uses of fund Vanessa just shared, we invested a lot of our ARP money in staff. So prior to ARP, we were a team of 3 full-time staff serving about 3,400 McKinney-Vento students each year. And as you all know, that was not a good setup. So with our ARP funding, we added 4 outreach specialists. And when I initially envisioned those, I thought that I would use those positions more for outreach directly to students and families. But as we really launched that, what we found is what we really needed was that outreach to the schools. So as a staff of 3, we outreach to schools primarily just through email. There, certainly were many people in the district I had never met before. They were a little icon on my computer, but that was the extent of our relationship. So with the ARP funding, we hired 4 outreach specialists. Our district is broken up into 4 quadrants. So essentially we have 1 outreach specialist for each quadrant. That means they have 3 clusters of schools. So they have from probably 11 schools on up to 15 schools. And what we really do with those positions is they just have a regular, consistent presence in all of the schools. And so the outreach team really spends 3 days a week, not sitting at our office, doing paperwork or things on the computer, but really out at schools to be that visual reminder of we have the McKinney-Vento program, and we're here to check on our students, making sure that the backpacks and clothes and food and things that we are sending to schools are actually getting to students really quickly. So it's just a way for us to have just a greater hands-on approach with school staff. And so that's been really successful there. I always know where the outreach staff has been because I always get an email later in the day saying, oh, Sheila came by today and she told me about this or shared this with me. So it's just been a great way for us to connect more deeply with the schools. Just as I said, we're a really large district, with 160 some odd schools. So it's nice for us to have that more personal touch. The other staff position we invested in was a community partnership specialist. And like many of you, I was used to securing community partners, going to community events, and really building and nurturing those relationships. On top of everything else that I was doing during the day. And what we really found and what I had suspected for a while was once we could really have someone who is devoted full time to building these community partnerships, we would then really be able to free up a lot of the funding that we previously were having to spend, like to buy school uniforms and things like that. We now can pretty readily rely on the bulk of that being received through donations. And then it's also enabled us to hit a lot of those areas and needs that families have that we couldn't do with grant funding. So Vanessa had shared a minute ago, about food for the family or food for the students. So we always had a partnership where we could provide food for the students. And then through our community partnership specialists, we've engaged a number of different organizations that stock a food pantry that is in our office space. So we have our very own food pantry that is all donated food, so we can then give that freely, to support families as they need it. So that's been another great addition. And we've had some, exciting small projects. We've had big projects through community partnership specialists, but I think that, many of us wear a number of hats. And the amount of time and energy that you really do need to invest to build those community partnerships and kind of have them flourish and bring new people on the board. We found it was great to have one person who was really tasked with that, and we have someone in that role who has a PR communications kind of background, and that's certainly a different lens than I would approach the work through a social work lens. So that's been awesome. And then the last kind of initiative I have on here that I just want to share about, particularly when Vanessa was talking about, the end date for the funding and, if you're sitting on a couple $1,000s, what might you spend it on? We had a high school student who had been a McKinney-Vento student in our district who did an internship with us this past summer. She goes to Berea College up in Kentucky. And so Berea funded her work with us as an intern. So it was free of charge to us. And one of the things that our intern did was really combed through a variety of resources to identify professional development, like lending library materials that, were things I had never heard of. So, I knew of a book called Fly Away Home, and I knew of, 3 or 4 books that, tangentially touched upon homelessness. But our intern spent about a month really digging into online resources, just kind of coming through Amazon. And you can see in that picture in the middle, we now have a brand new lending library in our office space. And the design behind this is when we have those school staff who either seem really eager to learn a whole lot more kind of beyond our basic McKinney-Vento trainings, or we have someone who's maybe a reluctant McKinney-Vento supporter and we need to tell that story to them in a different way. We have a variety of books not only geared towards teachers and adults, but then we also have a number of copies of a lot of really fabulous children's books. And the idea there is that our outreach specialists can take those books into a first grade classroom. There's one of the books I know is called A Shelter is a Home, and we can introduce these books into classroom libraries so that school staff and teachers can share those books with students so that the students in their classroom might recognize their stories in that library in the school classroom. So that's, I think, a pretty easy way, if you're sitting on some funding as the grant cycle's wrapping up, if you want to email me, I'll be happy to send you the Excel document that our intern created that just lists, I think there's probably close to 200 titles on there. Certainly we couldn't buy everyone, but if you're interested in that lending library kind of resource list, I'd be happy to share that with anyone who might want it. And just kind of quickly, the pictures that you see on here, the photo on the right is of my team. And as I said, we went from a team of 3, we're now a team of 9. The middle picture is the lending library that we have. And then the first one is just a banner for our program in our office. And then Vanessa, I think I have maybe one more slide with some other photos. And these just show the picture on the right, again, is some of this lending library and the books we've gotten from different community partners and purchased with grant funds through the professional development line item. The picture on the bottom where it says Buena Vista School, which is the hub of our new office space, that's a group of volunteers that our community partnership specialists connected with. They were actually medical students from Vanderbilt University of Medicine, and they came and did a Martin Luther King Day service project with us last year. So you can see from that picture, that was 20, 30 some odd folks who were introduced to the work and came into our space, and many of them have come back and volunteered and partnered with us in other ways. There's also a volunteer up there on the top left. So I imagine many of you all get shoes from Souls for Souls. This is one of our volunteers who comes in once a week and helps us distribute those shoes. The middle picture of the coats, that's just an example of, we have several community partners that our community partnership has engaged with. Many were supporters we've had for a while. Some of them are newer on board, but we have a ton of different groups that do different coat drives for us. And now that we're back from fall break, we have lined the halls of our building with these fabulous coat racks that have brand new coats, gently used coats, but a variety of coats that are all provided by donations from community partners. And then the food bag is just an example of what we've done with our food pantry. Again, as Vanessa said, we're now able, because we have donated food items, to provide food to feed an entire family. And with our food pantry, we really focus on hotel friendly, microwavable, low prep, ready to eat food. And so that's just a sampling of the some of the items that we have. So mac and cheese in an individual cup, some of those individual Hormel meals. But we have really been able to tailor the needs of our food pantry, so we don't just have a bunch of canned vegetables and dried pasta. We have things that families that are living in cars or living in hotels can easily prepare and consume. And again, all of that comes through community donations through the great partners that we have. So that's kind of my blurb about what we're doing. I know some of my friends from surrounding counties, I think Robertson County and Sumner County, are coming to visit my space. If you happen to be in Middle Tennessee and you have the time or the opportunity in your schedule to come by and see what we have. I know Vanessa has been to visit us, but I'd be happy to see anybody in Nashville who wanted to look at our space. But I really just can't emphasize enough how the additional staff, I think as liaisons and educators, we all just work ourselves to the bone and just do more and more and more and more. But I really do think we've had a relatively easy case of showing the effectiveness of the new positions that we've had. I do hope to retain all of those positions and shift funding either to my Title I set aside or possibly one position onto my McKinney-Vento funds. But we, certainly as we hired, we were very clear with folks that, for the moment, these were time limited funded opportunities, but I really do think they've all proven to be so effective that we will be able to continue them. So,
Catherine, one quick question:
Have
you considered doing Title II or Title IV to pay for sustaining some of these staff that you've hired on? Is that something that you have talked out with your board?
We have had some discussions in federal programs, I think, about using Title IV, and I forget what the answer was that I got, but certainly as we make it through this first semester and really look at what funding we have left to spend, we will really be making an earnest effort to find additional ways to fund these positions. Because like I said, the effectiveness, particularly in those outreach specialists, in terms of really increasing our student identification. If you have a well-trained secretary and she's going to remember to maybe email you at the end of the day about a student, it's very different when someone she knows every Wednesday Nell's going to be standing in front of her saying, so just tell me what kids we need to discuss. And that kind of personal touch and just deeper relationships have really done a lot for our student identification. And I'm sure, like a lot of you all, our numbers were up by the end of September. We had an increase of 22%. And our McKinney-Vento students from where we were in September of last year. So I can certainly attribute that to the outreach specialists that we have doing that direct work in the schools on a regular basis.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And Jennifer had dropped in the chat that she appreciates you sharing about how you're using your funds. So I appreciate that. I will turn it over to Michelle from Kingsport City.
Thank you for having me. Catherine, you're always hard to follow. She does such a fabulous job. And when she has over 3,000 students, all I keep thinking is, how does she do it? But I know she has a dedicated staff that helps as well. And the reason, I'll just tell everybody, the reason why I don't have slides is because my son was actually scheduled to have his wisdom teeth removed today, and that got rescheduled kind of last minute. So here I am. So unfortunately, I don't have slides or those wonderful pictures, but just want to share with you the ways that we have used our ARP 1.0 and 2.0 funds. The bulk of what we have used our funding on, like Catherine, has been adding staff. We have a full-time homeless resource specialist who's also more or less a systems navigator. And then we have 2 part-time homeless services facilitators that work in our schools, much like what Catherine was talking about. We have one that's more dedicated to our pre-K and elementary level. And then we have one who's our secondary level for the middle and high schools. We are a much smaller school district we have than Catherine's. We have just over 7,500 students in the school system, and we have like 13 schools. So much smaller than what Catherine has in her system. But like Catherine, we have seen just the need to, it's because it's hard for us as a liaison to be all the places all at once. And so having these staff being able to go into the schools, the homeless services facilitators, they have helped increase student identification. Like Catherine said, when it was just us and an assistant, then, it may be that the secretary thought at the end of the day to send an email. But when we have folks regularly in the schools, they know that person's coming, and it may be, oh yes, I meant to send an email to Michelle about, so-and-so, but since you're here, let me tell you, and let me tell you kind of what the needs that we see. And also for students who are already in the program, if there's needs or concerns, they're more apt to think to share that information if they see, our staff come in every week. And they can address the needs more timely. They also help monitor attendance and try to address the chronic absenteeism. When they're on school site, they try to meet with the students if they're struggling with, school attendance, and just ask, is there a certain reason, how can we support you? Reaching out to the families saying, I noticed so-and-so has missed, X number of days. Is there a change in your living situation? Can we help you with transportation? Just getting to those needs more quickly. And also doing monitoring the academic performance of the students and talking to the teachers to see, is it just they're not turning in the work, or is it a comprehension they don't understand? And then trying to address that, reaching out to the parents, trying to help them get set up with like the parent portal on Aspen so that they can see the grades in real time, and see what assignments may be missing, connecting the students to in-house services, tutoring that's available at school, working with our after-school programs, to get the students enrolled in those and those programs that offer the homework assistance, because a lot of the parents may struggle helping the students with, their homework, just based on their ability. Maybe they didn't finish school. Maybe there's so many kids, in the home environment where they're staying that it's hard to focus on the school work. So, kind of having that that environment where the students can, focus on the school work, and then also have the assistance needed. So we have been using funds for the after school programs as well. Our homeless resource specialist, she's kind of like the community partnership specialist in a way that Catherine has, but basically she just helps the families and unaccompanied homeless youth with those needs outside school walls. She follows up weekly with families. Usually she does it through text or phone calls to see if there are any needs and to see if they have like upcoming appointments for housing or social services. She helps the families and unaccompanied youth complete applications for like food stamps or teen care, even the housing applications. A lot of families, transportation's an issue. So we used our van that we purchased with the ARP funds to help transport them to these appointments, and then to also act as an advocate for the family. So if they have an appointment with Kingsport Housing and Redevelopment Authority, we can make sure that they're able to get there. If they need help getting documentation to complete the application process, that's something that the homeless resource specialist works on. We also, like I said, we got the van, and I guess the way that we justified it is that our school system does have vehicles, but it was not always readily available when there was a need. So it was a matter of me, calling the secretary for our superintendent saying, is there a school van available? We need to take this child to school because their living situations changed and we don't have a bus worked out yet. And I was just kind of at the mercy of, when a van was going to be available. So using our ARP funding, we were able to get a van, and we have lovingly named it the Hot Mess Express. But it is used exclusively by our staff, the homeless education program and ARP staff. And we transport children to and from school when a bus isn't readily available. Or like this morning, we actually transported 2 children to school. A mom was at her work and had to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning and didn't have anybody to watch her child. So we went and picked up the child at the parents' work this morning and took the child to school. And then as I was driving to work, had a mom frantically call that her son missed the bus and he had a field trip this morning. So after we dropped off the one student, we went and picked up the other and took him. So having the van made that possible, because like I said, I wouldn't have, okay, I see a question that pops up. Yeah, I don't have the number of students that Catherine has. I have, last year, at the end of last school year, we served 280 students. Currently, we have 164 students. So, and then of course we work with the younger siblings as well, trying to help them get into Head Start or our our LEAs, pre-Ks, and things like that, or if there's developmental delays, then child fine or TEIS. So, but as far as the van, we've used it to. I've had a parent that was living in a car that I was able to get her connected to a resource. And this whole time we were trying to help her get into housing. But it was just, the apartment wasn't available. It was that transitional period. So I worked with our United Way, and we were able to get her into a hotel. And so the United Way paid for her to stay for a hotel for a couple of weeks, because that's like the max that they can help pay. And then that allowed time for our local shelter, Family Promise, to have an opening, which we were able to get the mom and her daughter over there. And so we used the van to go get all of her belongings to transport, from the hotel to the shelter. And then when her apartment was ready, we were able to use the van to take her belongings to their stable home. And the van that we got is it's like a passenger van that can convert to a cargo van. So we can scoot the second row of seats as far up as we possibly can, and we can put the third row seats down into the floor, and we have a lot of space. We have taken a dining room table and chairs to families using that van. It's just been definitely a blessing and kind of multi-purpose. But we've delivered food boxes, to families who couldn't come to our winter break food box distribution. We've done home visits. Yeah, so the Hot Mess Express is definitely been well worth it. And we also use our ARP funds for cell phones for the staff, just in that communication. I have found that parents will not answer phone calls, and they won't look at their email, but they'll answer a text. So that is primarily how we communicate with a lot of our families, is just via text. And I mean, there's sometimes, a parent will send me a text, please give me a call. And then of course I'll follow up with a call. But a lot of times if I'm trying to reach, or someone from the school levels trying to reach by phone, then they don't always answer, but they will answer that text. So that has been a huge blessing to have that. And we also use the ARP funding to help with like the inflatable mattresses and the pumps and the bedding. Because like Vanessa was saying earlier, if they're not getting a good night's sleep, then they're not going to perform well at school. And also just, I was jotting down some of the ideas that Catherine had shared. So if I have like some leftover funding, that professional development lending library, that sounds like a wonderful thing. But that's kind of in a nutshell what we have been using our funds for. And I hope that's been helpful. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer, or if they think of something later, they can just reach out to me. I can put in the chat box my email. And
yes,
so,
and I will add that to the slides too. I don't have it on there now, but thank you, Michelle, for sharing. I did, when I invite from the field speakers, I do try to get some of the speakers from the larger urban. And then of course, we also want to include your small rural LEAs, because again, each LEA has different experiences. While Catherine serves thousands of students, Michelle serves a smaller amount of students, but for that area, that is a large amount for her. And so having those perspectives from both sides of it is something that I try to provide. And Michelle, how, if you are going to sustain any of these positions, are you looking at Title II, Title IV, maybe your your McKinney-Vento? I know a lot of times boards give you pushback on using any other funding, but any thoughts on that?
I'm hoping to at least incorporate and maybe kind of blend because I don't see it being feasible for me to keep the entire staff. And like Catherine had said, it's just, it's difficult, when you go and you say, we want to continue to fund these positions. Like she said, she doesn't quite remember what the answer was when she went about the title for. I do know, that just federal funding in itself is not always predictable, and if we'll get an increase or a decrease, with our title. But my hope is at least to kind of blend the homeless resource specialist position kind of with the homeless services facilitator, if I could possibly keep at least one full-time person who's doing that. That would help us tremendously. And my hope was through McKinney-Vento and possibly some Title I funding as well. I do have one of my homeless services facilitators who has, before she joined us, she was actually the board president for our Kingsport Child Development. And she has some history in being able to, do grant applications and things like that. So I thought about even asking her to see what other, grants may be available to help with this, that she could help us apply for. But yeah, with the, I wish I could say I had a definite plan to continue this, but my hope is that funding will be available.
Well, I thank you for being honest, because again, a lot of times I get that from the field, like, hey, we're not gonna be able to sustain this, and that's okay. Ed just keeps encouraging how, get out, give ways on how you possibly might do that. So sharing that feedback is I think very helpful. And there are lots of other grants out there, like you said, some research on that. The Runaway Youth has scholarships and grants and outreach, street outreach, and those kinds of things. So yeah, when I get those in via email or in other webinars that I attend, I do try to pull that and provide that information to everyone in the federal programs blurb. So if you're not already getting the federal programs updates, make sure that you're getting those. So that everyone can kind of see. I do, again, send emails quite often about guidance from Ed or just from other entities that may be out there. So again, I thank you, Michelle, for joining us and sharing what you're doing with your programming. I will add Catherine's and Michelle's contact information in our resource slide. Does anyone else have any questions for either of these ladies before we move on? Okay, as usual, I have resources here for you. We have the American Rescue Plan from the Department of Education, the Frequently Asked Questions from ARP Homeless. That's a great resource and tool. Maybe I didn't cover some of those things today, but if you check out their questions and answers that they have come out from across the state, people have had questions from SEAs and LEAs, so that's a good place to look at that. The National Center for Homeless Education, they have wonderful ideas for ARP Homeless, and on top of that, they have webinars that you can use for PD for your staff. And then Schoolhouse Connections, again, another great resource for ARP Homeless on ways to spend money and get these funds down. The technical guides for ARP Homeless 1.0, 2.0, and your authorized activities for McKinney-Vento, just a reminder. And then Serving Students Under Title I Part A is a brief from the National Center for Homeless Education. Again, I apologize that I don't have Michelle and Catherine's information, but I will get that adjusted and I will put that in the slide deck for the TDO resources. So any final questions before I send it right over to the survey slide, because I know everyone has been waiting for the good old survey slide. Please take a few minutes to fill out this survey. I hate doing surveys, but I really do encourage you to do one because it gives me a way to know what I am presenting, if it was useful, what I need to adjust, things that I could, provide more insight on. So please fill out that survey for me. Any other questions that you have about how you're going to use your ARP funding for the ladies on the call with us? Unmute your line or drop anything in the chat box. We just have a few minutes left, but I want to make sure we give everybody time. Okay, well, I guess there's no questions. I do appreciate you guys joining us today. Our next quarterly call is going to be in January, and I'm hoping to have Schoolhouse Connections join us. I have a meeting with them at the end of the week to kind of discuss some topics that they will cover, so we'll have special guests for that. If not, I probably will try to have somebody from HUD join us. So I know for sure in January we'll have community partners, and so I hope you'll be able to join us then in January. Again, please have a great day, and thank you for joining.